Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's show. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bruce Markison. And as usual, I am joined by co-host and executive producer, Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how have you been?
Pretty good, Bruce. How's everything been going with you?
Good up until the moment ago. I just looked at this script that I wrote up and I spelled your name wrong. I had Tracy Astera. I left the I out. I don't think I've ever done that before.
Well, I never noticed.
You didn't. You did not. Okay. No. All right. It's a tricky name. There's a lot of syllables. I had you as Tracy Astera, but it is indeed Asteria. So nothing going on? Nothing exciting? Nothing?
Nothing exciting on this, bah humbug day. So absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you're telling me the day that we're recording is one of these sort of unofficial holidays, and they've pretty much come up with a holiday for every day of the year, 365 days. And this is known as Bah Humbug Day. What is the purpose behind this?
This is a day to vent your frustrations and embrace your inner Scrooge before the holiday and the festivities commence. So this is the only day you're allowed to do it. You can be an Ebenezer Scrooge and just express your humbug all day today. But it will end at midnight, and after that, bring on the holiday cheer.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about Scrooge and A Christmas Carol, both at the website and also here on the podcast. We each expressed our views recently about our favorite versions of A Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. You went with the film from 1951 with Alistair Sim, which I think is probably the most popular choice if we were to do a poll of people who have watched and followed A Christmas Carol over the years. That would probably win out. I like the one from 1970 with Albert Finney, which is a musical version. But I did watch just the other day a really good one, and I've seen it before, but it's been a while. And it's the one I think was early 80s with George C. Scott, a great actor. And that's another excellent interpretation. Have you seen that one?
I have. It's been quite a long time, but he was just an excellent actor. So that was a really good version as well.
Yeah, and we certainly are familiar with him for horror, The Changeling, which he did in 1980, and then in the early 90s, Exorcist 3, two outstanding horror movies, especially The Changeling, and George C. Scott was great in both of them. So the Christmas season continues. Right now, though, it is time for us to do something a little bit different. And I'm really looking forward to this because this is a change of pace. A lot of times we talk about movies, television, popular culture. This week's guest has an area of expertise. Well, it touches both the genres of horror and mystery. His name is Ken Gerhard. Ken is a widely recognized cryptozoologist, an author, a lecturer who frequently appears on television. He has traveled the world searching for evidence of a variety of mysterious creatures. They include Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, Mothman, and this also another one that I'd not really heard of before. Ken brought this one up in his introduction, the Beast of Gévaudan, which apparently is a French monster as well. So he has explored all of these different stories. Ken has written 6 books on the subject of unknown animals. One of them is The Essential Guide to Bigfoot. His research has been featured on numerous television shows, including Missing in Alaska, MonsterQuest, Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, The UnXplained with William Shatner, and also Legend Hunters. Ken has appeared on many major networks. They include the Travel Channel, the Science Channel, National Geographic, Sci-Fi, and Animal Planet. And currently, Ken can be seen on the History Channel series, The Proof is Out There. We're very glad to have with us Ken Gerhard. Ken, welcome to the Ghostly Gallery. Thank you.
Good evening, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you tonight.
Well, we do appreciate that. And I should mention that Ken and I have a little bit of a local connection. Ken used to live in Texas, recently moved to upstate New York, so lives not too far from where I do. I'm in Cooperstown. I don't want to give away Ken's exact location, but he's in the general area, and I became familiar with some of his work when I attended his recent presentation at the Cooperstown Village Library, which I found very fascinating. Ken, you're considered one of the leading experts on cryptids, and I have to confess this is a term I think I only heard for the first time about a year ago. And I started to get an understanding of what it is, but it may be a term not familiar with everybody in our audience. What exactly are cryptids?
Well, first off, Bruce, I commend you for pronouncing it right. Some people say cryptoid or cryptozoid, and I hear different iterations, but yes, it is cryptid. It's very Latin, of course. It's a term that was coined by the founding father, or one of the founding fathers of my field, cryptozoology, Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans, who was a Belgian zoologist. And he kind of started this field of research in terms of missing or mysterious animals, essentially animals that are hidden from science. So a cryptid, in his definition, was one of the subjects of the field of cryptozoology, and cryptozoology means the study of hidden animals. And Heuvelmans originally wrote about things like the Yeti and sea monsters and, all those types of creatures around the world. You go around the world and you find lots of different legendary creatures. You mentioned the Beast of Gévaudan. So yes, a cryptid. Now, the name has evolved because it was originally intended to be a mysterious or unidentified animal, because Heuvelmans was a zoologist and very scientific. But, pop culture has kind of adopted that term, and it's evolved to mean to different people things that are more supernatural or extraterrestrial, aliens and Slender Man and Wendigos and shapeshifters, skinwalkers, all those types of things.
So really, they're creatures that are in dispute. Some people believe they exist, others do not. Other people are not sure. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's an accurate description. And, it's usually a small percentage. I mean, admittedly, like in terms of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, only about 17 to 22% of the population believes it could exist. So only about 1 in 5 people. It might be higher for other cryptids. I don't know, but Bigfoot's kind of the rock star of the field. So that's a good barometer of where we're at in terms of, and of course, the scientific establishment in particular thinks that it's all kind of pseudoscience and very fringy. I understand that. It seems remarkable that some of these things might exist. So,
Oh, wow. So a lot of people, they kind of like use titles, cryptozoologist, author, researcher. When someone asks you what you do, what is your go-to answer when you tell them about your career?
well, I would say cryptozoologist is the primary description I would use, and all those other things that I do, author, lecturer, TV presenter, are kind of based on my research in cryptozoology. And I also feel like I have to kind of carry the mantle, Tracy, because I mentioned Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans. Of course, he passed many years ago. I'm maybe part of the 3rd or 4th generation of cryptozoologists, and we're kind of a dying breed. We're becoming as elusive as the cryptids that we hunt. So sadly, we've lost a lot of researchers through the years, and there are some younger researchers coming up. But in terms of cryptozoology, what I'm very proud of, even though I don't have a scientific degree, my father was a scientist, so I kind of grew up in a scientific household, I guess. But I do try to follow as scientific a methodology as possible.
Right.
It should all be evidence-based. I utilize critical thinking and, objectivity and deductive reasoning and all those things. So it should be really based on evidence. And we don't have much in cryptozoology. It's mostly anecdotal stuff like eyewitness accounts and legends and things like that. So I'm honored that I seem to get a lot of credibility, or in terms of, how I present the field. My research is not too far out there. I think it's possibly to people that are skeptical or on the fence, that, hopefully I present the material in a fairly scientific way.
Oh, wow. You definitely have my attention. I'm a paranormal investigator. I kind of do that on the side. So
Oh,
I totally get kind of where you're coming from. So I'm kind of curious, what is the very first mysterious creature or case that made you realize this wasn't just a hobby, but something you really seriously wanted to investigate?
oh, wow. It's a good question. I mean, it's been a lifelong interest of mine. I uh, grew up watching monster movies, and I also grew up collecting a lot of exotic animals and things. So when I was about 8 or 9 years old and I found out about Bigfoot, and shortly thereafter the Loch Ness Monster, it was kind of just ignited this lifelong passion. But I never planned on making it a career. I never thought I could do it, full time. So it was just kind of a hobby most of my young life. And then in the early 2000s, maybe 25 years ago or so, I was on the internet and I found some other researchers in Texas who went out in the field and looked for evidence of Bigfoot. They had groups and they organized expeditions and things. And so I kind of connected with them, and I've never seen Bigfoot or any other cryptid, but I'm convinced I've heard Bigfoot, Sasquatch vocalize a few times, and seen other evidence. And so I kind of got convinced. I was probably convinced around 2003, 2004, when I began to hear some of the vocalizations and see footprint evidence and stuff like that. So that's when I really seriously got hooked. Although I should mention, I did attempt some field research when I was young as 15 years old. My family vacationed at Loch Ness in Scotland. This was back in 1982. And I did bring a 8mm movie camera along, and I was interviewing people around the lake and camped out and trying to look out for Nessie. So I have attempted field research for years, but I guess to answer your question, it got real serious for me in the early 2000s when I began to experience things. And then shortly thereafter, I began, writing books and appearing on TV shows and stuff.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that must have been so cool when you were a kid to go to Scotland and try to look for the Loch Ness Monster. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Um,
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine. I do have one more quick question. You kind of mentioned it a little bit a few moments ago, but when it comes to cryptozoology, how do you separate the serious research that you do from some of the stories and the folklore that you hear?
Well, that's a great question. I've probably become more skeptical as the years have gone by, and that might just be a natural progression of age and experience, and just having been in the field a long time. I'm always interested in hearing people's stories,
Mhm.
but whereas I used to be more open to talking to people about at length, a lot of the time about really sensational claims and accounts. I don't have as much of an appetite for that these days, I'm afraid. And I don't want to come across as being disingenuous, but, or questioning anyone's integrity. But some of the accounts that people, I've never seen Bigfoot, and I've been searching for decades in very active areas all over the continent. But, then people will contact me and say, oh, I'm in contact with Bigfoot on a regular basis. They live on my property and we exchange gifts. Or some people that have claimed to have seen multiple creatures. I've seen Bigfoot, I've seen Mothman, I've seen aliens. And so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I mean, I suspect there are a lot of different cultural and sociological reasons we could talk about. Or maybe people really are having fantastic experiences, but what's lacking is the evidence. It's usually just claims and stories of experiences that are pretty hard to, for me at least, to just invest a lot of time in. Now, on the other hand, I was at a Pennsylvania Bigfoot event earlier this year, and I met a couple from New York, and they had a sighting out in the Allegheny Mountains, and they were very convincing. They said, we never even thought about Bigfoot. We never gave it a second thought. And then we look up the hill and we see this thing running up the hill on two legs, and it turns and looks at us, and we're 100% sure it was Bigfoot, and so they came across as very, those types of accounts where
Mhm.
people don't seem to have an invested interest, in these experiences. It just happens. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, for me, this area of interest probably goes back mid 1970s. And the first cryptid, if you will, that I remember hearing about, Bigfoot. And it was basically through a television show that I used to love to watch, The $6 Million Man.
Oh, yeah.
And there was an episode very famously that featured a Bigfoot character. Now, I haven't seen that episode in years, and it's probably very hokey looking back. But that's when I first became aware of it. And I know that the Bigfoot legend goes even further back than that, at least the 1960s, maybe even further back. But for me, it was the 1970s. It was the $6 million man. And that was the cryptid that people talked about the most. Does it remain the most popular of all these creatures? Is it the one that is discussed more than any other all these years later?
Oh, absolutely. Bigfoot is the rock star. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the two names are interchangeable, of course. Sasquatch is more of the Canadian version, and Bigfoot more American. But yes, Bigfoot's a rock star. As an example, I appear at several events each year. Bigfoot conferences, where you basically imagine a convention center with a bunch of very serious Bigfoot enthusiasts and speakers. And those types of events are drawing, 1,200 to 2,000 people. But then I also speak at festivals, that draw 5, 10, 20, 40,000 people, Bigfoot festivals. Now, granted, everyone at the festival isn't necessarily there to talk about Bigfoot. They may just be checking out the funnel cakes and live music or whatever. But so Bigfoot is very popular. A lot of that's because of social media. It's maintained popularity, I should say, because of television, social media, and that kind of thing. So I don't know for the same age, Bruce. I'm guessing we might be in the same ballpark, but I also first learned about Bigfoot in the mid-70s. I do remember in February of 1976 when that $6 Million Man episode aired, because that was right in the midst of my discovery of Bigfoot. And, there were a lot of great shows even back then, like In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy and Arthur C. Clarke's World of Mysteries and that kind of stuff. But yeah, Bigfoot's incredibly popular. I sell far more Bigfoot books than my other books typically. So.
Now, just to clarify, when we talk about Bigfoot, this is not just one monster or one creature, because there have been sightings all over the place. There have been sightings where you were before in Texas. There have been sightings in Canada, New York State, New Jersey. So it's more like the feeling of a species known as Bigfoot rather than a singular character like the Loch Ness Monster, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And that, it's interesting that I still meet people that are under that impression that we're talking about one solitary survivor of a long lost prehistoric race or something.
Yeah.
But as you referenced, Bigfoot, Sasquatch sightings go back possibly to Native American traditions, where we have many different versions of the Sasquatch throughout the U.S. and Canada by different First Nations. Then you have wild man stories from the 1800s and early 1900s, long before the name Bigfoot was around. People would describe seeing these hair-covered wild men or gorillas or things running around. And then the name Bigfoot was invented in 1958, and due to a newspaper article and the find of some footprints. And so there have been, of course, the most sightings are on the West Coast. Northern California, Washington State, Oregon, British Columbia, up to Alaska, you have the highest concentration of sightings. But you also do have them here in the eastern United States, upstate New York, particularly in the Adirondacks, and Ohio and Pennsylvania get a lot of reports. Florida gets reports, something called the skunk ape. And the physical descriptions are pretty consistent. Average height 7.5 feet, weighing several hundred pounds, upright, hair covered, slightly different colors, but mostly dark coloring, very sloping forehead, big, robust, no neck, big shoulders, robust. And the footprints are very similar too. The footprints have been found and cast and documented in different places around North America. So it does seem to be, as remarkable as it sounds, it seems like it is a species, albeit in my opinion, a very rare animal, probably only 3,000 to 4,000 in the entire continent. So, much rarer, for example, than a bear. You're 150 times more likely to see a bear than a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Let's have some fun here, Ken. I want to have you make arguments for and against Bigfoot's existence. So let's begin with the argument against. Can you make that argument?
Sure. I have a chapter in my book, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, where I address this. Where are the remains? Even if Bigfoot or Sasquatch is an incredibly rare animal, you would expect at some point that one would have been found dead, or shot by a hunter, or hit by a car, or someone finds a body in the woods, something, and that's never, at least there have been claims of that, but there's never been a body produced. There's a big gap in the fossil record. The things that look like Bigfoot in the fossil record go back hundreds of thousands of years, and nothing that looks like Bigfoot, and we're talking about pre-human ancestors like Homo erectus, Gigantopithecus, the Australopithecines. They were basically, they looked like Bigfoot. They were like apes that walked upright, big, powerfully built. So we would have, if Bigfoot existed, it seems like there have been so many fossils found from the Pleistocene and other epochs that there would be some fossil evidence of Bigfoot or Sasquatch in North America. And finally, where's the photographic evidence? Because everyone's walking around with a phone these days that has a camera, a high quality camera. There are hunters, thousands of hunters putting up remote activated cameras, trail cams out in the woods. And no one's really produced any good photographic evidence since 1967 when the Patterson-Gimlin film was shot. That's still the most convincing film evidence. So those are the big three for me. No body, no good photographs, nothing in the fossil record.
All right. What about the argument that says, yes, there is a species of Bigfoot out there?
Well, it's a combination of all the different lines of evidence. We have thousands of eyewitness sightings that have been documented, and they're very, very consistent as far as the physical descriptions. You have the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967, which I just mentioned, which has never been completely debunked. A lot of people think that it could not be a man in a costume, not back in 1967, because you could actually see its muscles and things moving in a very natural way. And then you have the physical trace evidence, which I don't have any right here at hand, but there are Bigfoot castings of Bigfoot prints that have been documented. And there are people that have tried to fake those footprints. There are many that have been studied by physical anthropologists that are interested in Bigfoot and said, man, this is not a human footprint enlarged. These things average about 15.5 inches long and about 7 inches wide, but they don't look exactly like a human foot. They don't have an arch. They have a wider, longer heel, smaller proportionate toes, and they seem to display, many of them, dynamic foot flexibility, where the foot is a big flat foot that's bending and stuff and animating throughout a trackway. So, and we also have some handprints, knuckle prints, a butt print, things like that have turned up. And there are also some hair samples that have turned up that have not been properly, they weren't able to extract DNA from these hairs, but they were unidentified or connected to any other animal. And they were all very consistent in terms of the features of those hair structures. So, it's all very tantalizing. I guess the best argument I can make is if you put all of that together, I think it builds a compelling argument.
Very interesting. I guess you could say a preponderance of circumstantial evidence.
Yes, it's all circumstantial, but there's a lot of it, and it seems to connect in different ways. And I'll give you just a quick example, Bruce, which is something called the mid-tarsal break or mid-tarsal transversal joint flexion, which is something that was identified by an anthropologist named Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who sadly passed away in September. He was a colleague of mine, and he was an expert in the evolution of bipedalism in hominins, great apes. So he knew more about the foot anatomy and when he saw a Bigfoot trackway in 1996, he went from being a complete disbeliever and skeptic to, oh my God, this thing is real because I can see the animation in the trackway. But part of what he's identified is that sometimes the foot is just a half step. It just lays down the front half of its foot when it walks, which is something we can't do. We don't have that type of flexibility in our midfoot, but great apes do. And that particular feature has showed up in footprints in Northern California, Washington State, and even China, in footprints that look almost identical. So, how was that faked? If someone was out there faking footprints, and presumably these different incidents, they didn't really know about this stuff, and nor was any of this stuff publicized back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. So there's little things like that are subtle, where you look at and you say, gosh, that's an interesting coincidence.
Holy cow. Just being on the topic of evidence, what is the one type of evidence that really grabs your attention? Do you kind of gravitate more towards like footprints or patterns, sightings, eyewitness accounts? Like, what do you feel is the most credible evidence that you would use?
Well, as I said, I used to be more interested in eyewitness accounts, and I still do speak to people that have claimed that they've had sightings. But for me, I've kind of pivoted into more of the physical trace evidence, the footprint evidence. I've got a pretty good collection of cast duplicates from different places around North America that I look at. And also, again, going back and revisiting the Patterson-Gimlin film, which was actually coincidentally filmed exactly 1 week after I was born, on October 20th, 1967. I was born on Friday the 13th of October, 1967, by the way. But I've been to the film site. I've looked at the film hundreds of times. There's new technologies that are allowing us to stabilize and enhance different things in the film. And I don't know. I don't see, if you compare that footage to Planet of the Apes, which was filmed the same year, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, which has these ape men at the beginning, the costumes really look a lot worse in these multi-million-dollar productions than they do in this film that was shot by these two broke cowboys from Washington State. So I don't know. The film and the physical trace evidence is really what's exciting to me. And also, I'm kind of encouraging people that are out there in the field now to look for remains. I think that somewhere out there might be a tooth or a bone or skin or something that we could get DNA from. And DNA testing has become somewhat more affordable for researchers like me. I had my first eDNA test done a couple years ago, DNA analysis. So you can find labs that look at DNA. And if someone comes up with a novel hominin DNA, that would prove it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I just have like a really random off the wall question. I've read different reports on Bigfoot just before we move away from Bigfoot, that people believe they could be an alien species. I'm just curious, what's your thought on that?
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, I don't want to take up too much time here because I actually have a whole presentation about this because there are different camps in the Bigfoot field. I'm what is considered an aper. Okay. I'm like the old school researchers. Bigfoot is an upright ape that is very rare, that runs around in the woods. But through the years, there's another camp that's evolved, which are the people that think that Bigfoot is somehow interdimensional or extraterrestrial and it vanishes into portals, that it can cloak, that it can use telepathic ability, all these magical powers. And what I can tell you, because I have a whole presentation on this, is that that idea really evolved in 1970. Maybe this will be a segue, but there was a researcher named John Keel, author of the Mothman prophecies, who thought that all of this stuff was interconnected. He thought ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot were all the same phenomenon, that it was a shape-shifting or a changeling type of phenomenon that appeared in different ways to different people. And then throughout the 70s, as Bruce was talking about, there were these ideas were kind of blossomed when UFO magazines would often talk about Bigfoot or put Bigfoot. And so ultimately there's a thing called patternicity or apophenia, where humans try to find connections. We're compelled subconsciously to find meaningful connections in things sometimes that maybe aren't there, And also there's a lot of confirmation bias. And I should preface this by saying I have a lot of good friends who are ghost hunters and UFO investigators. And I think all of those separate phenomenon are, valid in different ways, but there's no need to connect them. But some people want to, because there's this desire that, if you're a UFO investigator and you get into Bigfoot, you might say, well, I'm just going to connect this to what I'm comfortable with, or, so there's a lot of social, psychological, cultural reasons that people want Bigfoot to be from another dimension. But what I can tell you is that the original Bigfoot researchers that started in the late 50s, for 15 or 20 years, they spent, they spent a lot more time than that, but none of them ever came to the conclusion that Bigfoot was anything other than a big undiscovered species, a very elusive species. And it wasn't until the 1970s, when people were getting all funky and groovy and, psychedelic. And, I remember you used to go to the bookstore in the 70s, and the Bigfoot book was in between Atlantis and the Bermuda Triangle, right?
Oh, goodness.
So you're right there, you're already kind of making an unconscious, like, oh, wow, okay, that's where Bigfoot belongs. So anyways, I don't think there's any evidence that they do. Honestly, the accounts that describe Bigfoot's vanishing and cloaking are very, very rare in the big scheme of sightings. Virtually everyone that sees Bigfoot, it's running across the road at night, or it's in the woods running up a river or something like that. So,
oh, that's really interesting, because I only actually just recently kind of heard those stories that, they're ancient alien beings. And I was like, I've never heard of that. That's why I was kind of curious
it's a question people ask me a lot. I don't see evidence for that. If I were to see a Bigfoot beaming down from a flying saucer, then I would be the first person to admit I'm wrong.
Oh my God.
There it is. It is from another dimension. You called it.
I love it. Oh, thank you. I was kind of curious too, of all of the cases that you have kind of investigated. Was there one that you found really specifically intriguing, but you're just kind of left wondering, like, is it true? Is it not true? Or is that just kind of like something that's really predominant in your field, that it's like there's still no 100% proof?
Yeah, there's nothing I'm 100% on board with.
Yeah.
I tell people I'm maybe 90% convinced of Bigfoot, maybe 80% convinced of lake monsters like Nessie. And then you get down to some of the less believable ones, like the Jersey Devil and things like that. Mothman, I think, is a valid phenomenon, but it's supernatural. It's probably more in your wheelhouse. It's something metaphysical. It's not a flesh and blood creature, based on the people that I've interviewed that have had experiences and all the research. So it's pretty far out there. It's something else. So, I mean, all the cases intrigue me for different reasons. I'm really, the field is much more vast than Bigfoot and lake monsters. I've investigated so-called black panthers or mystery cats, giant salamanders, monster salamanders in the Pacific Northwest, all kinds of weird pigmen and goatmen and werewolves. And, so it's all, some of it is more believable than others, or some of it seems like there's more evidence, I should say.
Right.
We should go by evidence, but I can't really point to one that stands above the others. I mean, they're all really, really interesting to me, all these cases.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, on Seinfeld, Kramer was a big believer in the pig man.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, we have one here in New York.
They did a whole episode about that.
Yeah. Did you
We
catch the
do?
pig man?
Really?
Yeah, Bruce. I think Bruce, you may have had to leave, but I talked about the pig man of Angola. Angola's up there,
I missed that.
kind of by Lake Erie. And yeah, there's a pig man bridge that I investigated, and a supposed pig man that haunts that old bridge there in Angola. So
Yeah, I had to leave early, as you mentioned, and I did not see that part. So the pig man, this is something that some people really feel is legitimate. Maybe you do as well. Oh,
well, I can't say that for sure. I think it's when you talk about these, I'm going to use the term anthropomorphic, which basically means half human, half animal. You envision these creatures from the island of Dr. Moreau, but we do have something called the dog man,
yeah.
which is like a lot of people have reported all over the world. There are different goat man bridges and railroad track haunts around the U.S. And there's also pig man. And in San Antonio, Texas, where I just moved from a few months ago, we had a donkey lady. And it seems to be a cultural, these are great urban legends. They're usually centered around an old stone bridge. And, you can summon them by saying their name 3 times, kind of like Bloody Mary, or, there's just a lot of commonalities, and they kind of connect to some of these old ideas of, if you remember, like the stories about the ghost stories about the Lover's Lane and the couple, and there's a creature with a hook that's like tapping on the glass. It's a half man, half goat. So I think that a lot of these, look, legends migrate and traditions migrate. And so, I think a lot of people migrated to this country over the past couple centuries and brought different legends from their culture, and they kind of became assimilated in the fabric of kind of North American culture. So I don't have a lot of I don't think there's a lot of credibility in terms of a pig man per se, but it's still interesting and worth investigating, like where the story came from.
Sure. You've mentioned a couple of times the Mothman, and I'm really curious about this because when I was growing up, again, going back to the great old 1970s, I don't remember hearing anything about the Mothman. That seems to be more recent a phenomenon in terms of coverage. It's been popularized in several films. I've seen a couple of them. I don't really completely understand what this Mothman is, where it comes from. You mentioned there's a supernatural connection there. Can you clarify exactly what people believe, people who do believe the Mothman exists? What's the theory there?
Okay. Yeah. Well, back in November of 1966, outside of an old sleepy town called Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is right on the Ohio River, 2 couples in a Lover's Lane area claimed that they saw this creature that was about 6.5 feet tall, man-like legs, gray color, wings folded against his back, and 2 giant red eyes, like that hypnotized them, transfixed them. And they chased their car at 100 miles an hour back to town. That story became worldwide news basically overnight because it was a pretty remarkable story. And there were other sightings around that area. Point Pleasant has a location called the TNT area, which is like this old abandoned munitions dump in the woods where the thing has been sighted. But what my research has found, because I investigated a Mothman creature in Mexico back in 2009 for a TV show called MonsterQuest. And then I began getting contacted by people that claim to have seen these Mothman creatures or encountered them. And it seems to be a worldwide phenomenon. And furthermore, my research indicates that you can go back thousands of years to ancient Sumeria and, read about the Apkallu or Abgal, or, in Assyria, there was the Pazuzu. And in different cultures around the world, you have these ancient creatures that are basically men with wings, and they're considered to be kind of demigods or spirits. There's a duality of nature. Sometimes they're evil, sometimes they're protectors. What I can tell you about, I don't really know what the Mothman phenomenon represents, but what I can tell you is the people that have encountered it are incredibly traumatized. I mean, I've had eyewitnesses break down and cry and sob. They've had to go to therapy. It's PTSD. It's a very terrifying experience when people encounter these creatures, whatever they are. They are frequently encountered near military bases and airports. They are frequently associated with UFOs. So there's your UFO connection with a cryptid right there. There are people that have had they've had experiences with these creatures, and then they have sort of residual hauntings and other experiences, poltergeist activity and things. So it's a multifaceted phenomenon. Some people call it interdimensional. Some people say extraterrestrial. Some people say demonic. So I don't really know. I don't think we're capable of understanding exactly what it represents. It does seem to change forms somewhat. I mean, it's basically the archetype is a winged humanoid creature, but that can be interpreted different ways by different people. But it's a very terrifying experience. These things have been around for a very long time. They're all over the world, and I have no idea what they are.
Yeah. Well, the description you gave is really frightening, maybe more so than some of these other cryptids.
Oh, yeah. Terrifying. Like I said, would not want to, I'm not scared of Bigfoot. I run out in the woods any night of the week looking for Bigfoot. But yeah, I don't want to come across one of these Mothman creatures. That's for sure.
Yeah. Another interesting one is the Chupacabra. And years ago, it's about 15 years ago, there was a presentation in Cooperstown at the Otesaga Hotel by someone who's kind of an expert in this field, much the way you are. And this person actually described the Chupacabra as kind of a Puerto Rican vampire. Is that an accurate description, or is it really something else?
Well, yes, its primary mode of predation is essentially sucking the blood out of small farm animals. So I guess in that respect, it is considered to be a vampire of sorts. Now, there's different types of chupacabras. I've interviewed the gentleman who investigated the first cases in Puerto Rico back in 1995. And he feels like these creatures, which were described as about 3 to 5 feet tall, upright, big eyes, spikes going down the back, claws, kind of reptilian features, that these were aliens and that they were basically extracting blood and other fluids from farm animals for some diabolical extraterrestrial experiments. Years later, in 2004, I began investigating reports of so-called chupacabras in Texas, and I've examined the remains of several of those animals. I have bones and tissue samples, and those all turned out to be just standard carnivores like raccoons and dogs and things that had weird, grotesque features at times. So, and there's no evidence that any of the ones in Texas or North America were blood drinkers. So the chupacabra in Latin American culture, it's kind of a goblin, a vampire, but it can take many different forms depending on whether you're in Mexico, Panama, Chile, Puerto Rico, Texas, or wherever.
Yeah.
So it seems to be one of the less likely cryptids, in my opinion, but very terrifying if you believe that they are out there and that they're drinking blood.
Yeah. I speak a little bit of Spanish, and if you were to translate Chupacabra in English, it literally means goat sucker. So, though apparently it doesn't just restrict its diet to goats, it goes after other farm animals, as you mentioned. And then, of course, Ken, we have, I guess, the other rock star in this field, and that would be the Loch Ness Monster. And you did mention near the top of the show that you traveled when you were fairly young to Scotland with your family. I'm curious if during that trip, you obviously were not an investigator or researcher, you weren't writing books at that time. But I'm curious if you actually went to the lake where this monster is said to exist, and if you got a little bit of a sense of what the people of that area think about this legend.
Well, the locals are mostly divided, but a lot of people think that it is that there's a real mystery in the loch that goes back many, many years. There have been some very credible sightings. The last time I was at Loch Ness was a couple years ago. I was part of the biggest expedition in 50 years, and I got to meet a guy named Willie Cameron. His father was a police officer, Sergeant Ian Cameron, had a sighting back in 1965 along with 8 other eyewitnesses. Some were on this side of the lake, some were on the other side of the lake, and they were all looking at each other while they watched this whale-like hump swim around for an hour against the current, submerge, come up. And so when you get sightings like that, it's pretty convincing. There's a lot of hoaxed photographs with regard to Loch Ness, but there are some somewhat intriguing or compelling films. And there's also a lot of sonar evidence. There have been sonar contacts since the 1950s of large animate things swimming around in Loch Ness. And I view the Loch Ness. Loch Ness is the most famous lake monster, but of course we have several here in upstate New York. We have the Lake Champlain monster, Champ, in Lake Champlain. You have up in northern Vermont, you have Memphrey from Lake Memphremagog. Here in New York in the Finger Lakes, we have Old Greenie and the Seneca Lake Serpent. So whatever these things are, the eyewitness descriptions are very similar, usually giant serpentine animals that are about 15 to 40 feet long, smooth skin, horse-like or sheep-like head, and they move up and down like this on the surface of the water. Some of the accounts may be based on, sturgeon and big eels and things like that, but I don't know. I think the lake monsters are very interesting. They seem to be, around the world in a northern latitude belt. Scotland, the US and Canada have many lake monsters, and then Scandinavia, Iceland, Russia, Japan. So there's similar types of lakes, cold water, very deep, usually connected to the ocean. It's a great mystery. Actually, my fiance Anne and I are going to be going back to Loch Ness this coming year at the end of June and beginning of July. We're working with a company called Mysterious Adventure Tours, and we're leading a tour of people that want to go over investigate the Loch Ness Monster with us. And we're also going to look into other Scottish legendary creatures like mermaids and fairies and giants and all kinds of things. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm also curious, Ken, about the landscape. Is this like a kind of a beautiful romantic landscape, or does it have more of a creepy atmosphere to it?
You talking about Loch Ness?
Yes.
Oh gosh, it's beautiful. Very much like here in upstate New York. It's a lot of rain. It's very wet. It's very cold. Beautiful trees and similar types of wildlife and some mountains. It's Scotland reminds me very much of the Pacific Northwest and upstate New York, New England, and some of these areas up here. And of course, it has an air of mystery about it because you have kind of the mist-shrouded loch and lots of old castles and ruins of old castles and things like that. Lots of folklore, and it's a beautiful country. I really love Scotland.
Very nice.
Oh, sorry. I'm still intrigued by your tour. Do you have information for anybody who would be interested in signing up to go? Is there anything online yet for that?
We're just announcing it now, and they're putting the itinerary together, but thanks for asking, Tracy. If anyone wants to Google Mysterious Adventure Tours, that's the name of the company. And they actually do ghost tours. This is their first cryptid tour, but they've been doing for several years ghost tours in places like Ireland and Japan and throughout Europe, where they go to haunted castles and things like that with big tour groups. And so they've gotten pretty good. And usually the tours are led by what they call ambassadors, which are typically TV personalities like myself. Grant from the show Ghost Hunters, Taps is one of their ambassadors, and Dustin Perry, and a lot of well-known ghost hunters kind of lead those ghost tours. So it's an honor for me and Anne, my fiance, and to be the ambassadors for this new Scottish mythical creatures tour.
Oh, that is
Mythic
fabulous.
Scotland. Yeah.
Mythic Scotland. Oh, wow. Oh, that is so cool. I'm gonna have to look at that because, like, Scotland, I've never been, but I've heard it's absolutely beautiful. And to kind of tack on a tour like that would be a chance of a lifetime.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Um, you had mentioned a little bit earlier, just going back when you were talking about confirmation bias. And I was kind of curious, like when you're doing your investigations and your research, how do you stay objective and kind of like not make it be true because you want it to be true, but just to remain objective? Like how do you balance that kind of a thing?
That's a great question, Tracy. I think it's kind of a superpower, and I strive to utilize it as much as possible. But it's not dissimilar to the exercise that Bruce had me do earlier. There's arguments for and against things, and you have to basically give an equal amount of thought to each argument and say, okay, is this real, or is there a way to I'll tell you, I've tagged along on some ghost hunts,
Mhm.
find it fascinating, and in a haunted location known as the Pride House, which was in Jefferson, Texas, famous photograph of a thing coming down the staircase, whatever. But we were there. I was just a fly on the wall and talking to this other ghost researcher, and they were doing this experiment in the front room with what do they call a ghost box, an obulus
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
And suddenly, this heavy door in the middle of the house between the kitchen and this hallway just slammed shut. Bam! And we spent a lot of time trying to figure out and debunk that.
Mhm.
Was there a breeze? Is this door loose? Is it rigged? And we never could figure out why that door slammed. And so to me, that's like the only ghostly thing that I've really experienced. But I thought it was like, so you go into, you always looking to debunk first. Any remarkable claim, you have to figure out, okay, uh, does this seem reasonable? Is this logical? Is the story logical? Are there other reasons where someone might interpret this a certain way? Or so a true skeptic tries to be agnostic when it comes to the evidence or the claim. So I guess that's it. I just try not to get emotionally invested in the idea that something is real. I mean,
Right.
of course we all want Bigfoot and I don't know about the Chupacabra and Mothman, but we all want Bigfoot and Nessie and maybe ghosts and all these things
Yeah.
to be real. Maybe they are, and that's a fascinating idea. But, it really does come down to evidence. Can we prove it to all the doubters out there?
True. Very, very true. Oh, that's fascinating. And my final question for you is just given how long you've been doing this, have you, like, is there one really big misconception that people have about cryptozoologists that you would like to kind of clarify?
Um, well, yeah. There are a lot of, and I talked about my superpowers. One is trying to be objective when it comes to,
Right.
the other one is not really worrying too much about what people think or say, because certainly people are out there are going to have polarizing opinions. But there are different Facebook groups, skeptic groups, and things where people have accused myself and other cryptozoologists and Bigfoot researchers as being grifters and charlatans. We know that Bigfoot doesn't exist, but we're making money off of it by writing books and doing TV shows and things like that. And what I want people to know is that I'm convinced they do exist. I mean,
Mhm.
it sounds remarkable, but I'm the people that I know in this field really have had experiences or have seen evidence, or for whatever reason, they're on board with the idea. They're not just trying to make money off of an idea. Now, some of us, I'm a full-time cryptozoologist, so I support myself with lectures and TV shows and books, and that keeps me
Mhm.
going. So, but yeah, that's one misconception, is that now I can't speak for everybody. Certainly there's always a few people out there that might be in it for the wrong reasons, and trying to make a buck. But there are a lot of very intelligent, uh, serious researchers with integrity in this field, and also in the fields of ghost hunting and UFO investigation. I've met many people like that.
Oh, wow. And do you have any kind of like advice or, um, I guess, guidance to give kind of maybe newcomers who would like to get into your field?
Well, Well, we've come full circle. I'll quote Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans, who started the field of cryptozoology in the 1950s. He wrote an essay about methodologies that should be applied in the field. And what he kind of ended with was that there are two characteristics that any good researcher has or possesses. Passion, that's the easy part, right? It's easy to be passionate about something like a mysterious animal or a creature, and patience, because things don't often happen quickly and you just have to kind of stick to your guns and persevere. And sometimes it takes months or years or lifetimes before before the dots connect. And so that's what I tell a lot of young researchers, that I do get a lot of emails and things from college students and high school students. Hey, how do I get into that field? And I tell them, well, you're not going to make much money. That's the first thing. But if you do it, patience and passion, or passion and patience, however you want to list those. But
oh, wow. I love that. That's actually a good motto for anybody doing anything. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ken, final question for this hour, and we really appreciate your time. You mentioned your involvement with the Mysterious Adventure Tour coming up in 2026. Any new book projects, either short-term or long-term, that you're working on? Anything in that area that you'd like to touch upon briefly?
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. Some great questions. I really enjoyed the conversation. I've got several book ideas outlined at the moment, but to be honest with you, I'm juggling. I do an online cryptozoology course through Patreon. If people are interested in learning about Bigfoot, Mothman, Nessie, whatever, I've got many students who have participated in that, exploring cryptozoology over on Patreon. And I'm currently on a TV show called The Proof Is Out There, which is airing on Friday nights on the History Channel, 10 o'clock our time here in the East. And I've got several public appearances coming up next year. I'll be appearing at conferences, ghost and Bigfoot conferences in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Kentucky, Wisconsin, and kind of all over the place. So those are mainly my priorities at the moment.
That's terrific. A busy schedule coming up for you and your fiance as well. Ken, we really appreciate the time. It's been a lot of fun. I know I've learned a ton about this subject, and it's one, I think I'm kind of a novice on it, but gradually learning more, and you've certainly opened my eyes on some of the interesting details related to these cryptids. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Our guest has been Ken Gerhard. Again, his current TV show on the History Channel, The Proof Is Out There. He's featured there, and he has written a number of books, including books about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness, among other topics. We appreciate Ken joining us. As always, I appreciate co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. We thank all of you for joining us in this Museum of the Macabre, and we do hope we'll see you again next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.